So this morning, I have the great opportunity to talk again with my colleague, and I would say now my friend, Andrew Weiler. And through the glories of internet, I can be in Berlin, and he is in Melbourne, Australia. And so we have a chance to find out what his over 30 years of experience, one-to-one and in groups, facing the challenge of second language communication. As always, we're going to have an interview with the principles of Globish. So that means we're going to speak slowly, clearly, and we're going to think, both of us, about the words that we use. Of course, since I come from New Zealand and he comes from Australia, I could fall into strine, which is Australian English, very easily, but that means the audience for this interview will be a lot smaller. Andrew, good evening.
Hi Mo, great to be here.
Great.
Great to talk with you again.
Great. So what I'd like to find out today is really perhaps a starting point would be what you see as the greatest challenge of second language communication based on 30 years in the classroom, in groups, what that would be.
So you believe in starting at the deep end, don't you? No gentle lead in here.
No.
Just jump right into the core.
Yes.
Okay, great. Love it. Okay, it's really a difficult question because there are so many factors at work. At its core, though, what I can say is that the biggest challenge that faces people is to come up or to rediscover the powers of learning that all of us were gifted with when we came into this world. All of us learned our first language to perfection, at least our spoken language, and that's undoubted. So we have already demonstrated that we're able to learn languages. And in fact, our first language is the hardest of all to learn by a long shot because there's nothing there. I wouldn't say nothing. There's very little there in terms of what we understand in learning a second language. The infant is starting off with very little in terms of the skills that we bring to our life as adults. So, and for a number of reasons, that particular skill or skills that we had to learn languages falls by the wayside. And as an adult, our task really is to reconnect or rediscover those powers that all of us already have. So that really is the biggest challenge. And once we can do that, nothing can stop us. And the good language learners, or the ones that we regard as talented, or the polyglots of the world, they are the ones who have already done that.
Polyglot means someone who can speak, I would say, more than, let's say, 4 languages, perhaps 5 languages, starts to become a polyglot. Yes.
Thank you for that. Yeah, quite right. Yep. So these are the people who have reconnected with these powers, who can. We think they're talented, and you may want to use that word, but really, that I don't find that word a useful word to use because it implies that we have no talent, and the reality is that all of us have talent. It's just that we have to discover where the talent is. That is the challenge.
I think that's great. Sometimes I think perhaps you'll agree, Andrew, that our work is very easy because we're always working with people who have already proven their unbelievable talent in communication. It is just it looks like a miracle what happens with a tiny baby, and then in the space of just a few years, the baby can produce beautiful language, or the young child can produce beautiful language nearly like an adult. So. In fact, we meet people who have already absolutely shown that they can do what they want to do with a second language.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as you say, it's not just use the second language, but in fact communicate, which is a lot more than using a language. It's they interact, they understand, they initiate, they pick up subtleties, innuendos, pick up so much. That's all the rich fabric of communication. That's what people who come to us, they already have all that to varying degrees.
Yes. So subtleties are the fine details, and innuendo is when we say things that are not actually what we don't say it directly, we say it indirectly. So yes, they have all of that, and what I think you're saying, Andrew, is that we're in the job of reflecting or mirroring back to the person what they already have in terms of skills and abilities, and what they're doing right now in a communication.
The skills that, as an adult, that the problem becomes that the skills that we had when we were learning the first language can diminish, can reduce, can be covered over, can be hidden by practices that we were given or we did as we grew up. To give you an example of that, in learning a second language in schools, most children are asked to memorize lists of words. Most children are asked to study grammar rules. There are variations, of course, but just to give you those two examples, that they can distract a child from paying attention to what they need to learn a language. But by starting to think that I will learn a language, I will learn, for example, French by memorizing these words, and I will learn French by learning these grammar rules, distracts the child, disturbs the child, moves the child away from what they need to do, is to become more attentive, paying more and more attention to what they're involved in. So attention is something that we're all attentive at different times to what happens in our lives, but in learning a language,
It's
our
it's an
attention can be
important
distracted.
it's an important word, the word attention. Could you give me some other words around that word, because it's a very, very important word, and I'm listening so carefully to what you're saying, and even in the conversation right now, also for the listener, they can notice: are they present? Are they noticing this conversation, or are they half distracted? For both of us now, are we fully present for this conversation? If we are, it will make for a more powerful experience, also for the viewer. So I think it's helpful to say more about the word attention.
Okay, so attention is what we do when we are interested in something or latched onto something. So when we, for example, talking to a friend, talking to our relative about something really important, we will pay very close attention to what they say, to how they say it, which is different to, for example, if you're talking to somebody else about something which might not be so important for you. Your attention can wander, and your eyes, for example, can start looking at somebody walking by the table next door, or you can start thinking about a conversation you had last night with your wife or mother or whoever. So if our attention is focused on something to the exclusion of something else, then all of our being, all of our self, all of who we are gets directed into that moment, into that time and place. That's when our attention is fully focused. That's when we start to, as you said, notice something. We notice things. We can notice how the person uses their mouth. We can notice how the sounds are coming out. We can notice how the music is in the language they are using. We can notice so many things once we're fully attentive to what we are doing, to what the person may be saying to us. And if we aren't attentive, all those things we can't pay attention. If we're not attentive to that, fully attentive, all those things that I just talked about, much harder to notice, and we won't notice it. We just won't notice it because because our attention is not fully onto that moment in what's happening.
Fantastic, and this is absolutely my own experience too. I'll just share a word with you, and then I'll explain it. The idea of coherence, and to explain that, it means that who we are, the deepest part of ourselves within ourselves, who I believe I am, and is it in line? Is it in the same direction as the communication I'm having? And is it in line with the deepest interests of the other person? And so, and of course, the classic example would be if someone, a beautiful stranger, comes up to us and in a strange language that we don't know and starts talking to us, but they're absolutely beautiful, and we're interested in a new relationship. We will listen very carefully. We will have huge attention to that beautiful stranger, and we will hear the sound and the rhythm and remember the movement of the body, everything. And we will be coherent. We will be very focused. We will have very high attention, and we will understand a lot more. We will be more effective in that second language.
Precisely.
Great. So one thing that follows on is the way I see, Andrew, that you're talking based on your own experience, and yet, of course, from conversations we've had, I see that you're well read, that you know of the experts in the field, and that you've had contact with approaches like the silent way of Gattegno. And this is a way of learning and teaching. But what was interesting for me was that you found that the simple contact between two human beings without the influence or effect or presence of a book or a philosophy or anything else, that simple contact between two interested human beings, if I understood you correctly, Andrew, this is the most effective way for learning to communicate in a second language. Did I understand you correctly?
Yeah, I mean, in learning a new language, without a doubt, the connection between two people, between the person speaking, the person listening, and vice versa, in a conversation, both people take different roles, whether it's the speaker or the listener. The maximum learning is going to happen when the person who's learning is actually fully engaged, fully attentive to what is going on in that conversation. And so the more engaged, the more attentive they are in that conversation, the more they can take out of it. And that's one of the things that, as an adult, we are different to infants, in that infants are in that space all the time. And anyone who's been around infants, and despite the fact we were all an infant, we actually do forget what it's like to be an infant.
Yes.
But you have to be in the presence as an adult of an infant to actually understand that these beings are fully present in whatever they do, and they're fully engaged in whatever they do. As an adult, for different reasons, we can learn to disengage from a conversation and be thinking all manner of things at the same time as having a conversation. And this really is counterproductive in learning a language, because as we all understand, as we have been saying, we have to be all there. And that's one of the skills, or one of the powers that we have to reconnect with. And the best way of doing that is whenever we are having a conversation, whether it's in our first language or our second language, is to train ourselves to be attentive in that conversation. So the more the more attentive you become, even in speaking your first language, that will rub off in the second language, because we are creatures of habit to a large extent, and being present and being focused on what's happening is something that we teach ourselves to yet again be in that space.
So, to put it into one word, what you're talking, long word, but it would be the word of the term self-awareness, so that we're not just walking through life, but we can actually notice the state of our mind and the state of our attention. That's what you're pointing to, I would say.
Well, that's an outcome of being present in whatever we do, is that we become more aware of our own. By becoming attentive to what's happening in the moment, we have more time, more space to become attentive to not just what's happening with the person we're talking to, but what's happening also with ourselves and how we respond to what's going on. And that's sort of a self-awareness that you can experience. And to varying degrees, we all experience that in our lives.
We all can do it. Everybody can say, "Oh, I can't understand you very well. I'm tired at the moment. Oh, I'm sorry. Somehow it's difficult to concentrate. I'm sick at the moment." So we all have,
absolutely,
even to a small degree, we all have this ability to notice the state of our mind, and to know some states of mind means that we can communicate better. Some states of mind we can learn better, and at other times we can't do it so well. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Would you say that the right mind, means the right way of thinking to communicate in a second language, is the same like in our first language, or different?
Well, the difference in learning a second, I try to talk about learning a second language, not just talking a second language, right?
Both. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in learning, I'll stick to learning because that's basically the topic we're talking about. In learning a second language, the difference is that we have to become aware of elements of the language which normally we would not be paying attention to in the first language, full attention. So we have to become attentive to the sounds in a way that we take for granted in the first language. We have to become attentive to the way the words are put together, the sequence in which the words are put together, the intonation, the tone the person is using, the changes that happen. There are so many things we have to become attentive to in learning a second language. And that's one of the things that a good language learner, or a language learner who's learned to become more attentive, basically that's what we're talking about now, starts to notice that these things are actually important in learning. In a classroom situation, a teacher's role is to bring the attention of the learner to these things, let's say in a faster way than they would by themselves. But not all teachers work in this way, clearly. But that's what's possible. But the
We
role
can
of
say. Mhm.
but the role of a language learner, an effective one, is to become attentive to these things as well as the meaning. Whereas normally, in speaking a first language, we only stay with the meaning, and
Mm,
unconsciously we pay attention to the other elements of language, like the
mm,
tone, but we take meaning out of all those things rather than work out how it affects meaning. So in a second
mm,
language, you have to
mm,
work out how that affects the meaning. In a first
mm,
language,
mm,
we
mm,
already know what they mean. That's the difference.
mm. And fantastic. And so we could see, and you've referred to that, that the each hour in a standard school approach delivers results, but also has the great risk of damaging our natural confidence in communication. Because in a school, if the focus is on vocabulary and grammar, the words behind communication, there can be a risk that the meaning is lost and that we lose our connection with that meaning for communication in a second language. Would you agree?
Well, yes, I do. The rider I'll give is that I think that teachers who teach in that way we've talked about will say that, yes, the learners are learning the meaning of a grammar tense, for example, or the meaning of that vocabulary. So that they may actually argue with that. But in fact, it's very artificial, and the learners, for the most part, are not connected at the essential meaning level. It's more at a conceptual level. It's the idea of something, which is it's hard to express it in a way that you can take away for some people. But there is a big difference between analysing, for example, how a sentence is put together, and being able to recognise what that actually means in your life, how you behave and how somebody behaves. It's working in a completely different way with relation to meaning, and that's
Mm,
the difference. That there is a meaning that comes from perception at one level when you're talking about real meaning, if I could use that, as
yeah.
opposed to just the conceptual level of what that means something and this is what it means. They're
Yes.
two different states or spaces you can talk about.
We know it. Is it real? Just keep it very simple. Is this communication right now? Is it real? Is it does it have a real purpose right now? Not just the purpose of learning a language, but is it a real communication right now? Because we only learn a language because we want to have real communication later with real people about real things. And so let's practice the goal right now, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely, having things impact you in terms of in a beginning class, for example, the meaning can be somewhat sort of reduced in terms of down to physical objects, for example, because the meanings you can't talk about, let's say, higher matters, but physical objects are very easy to talk about in a beginning class, and they are
Yes.
real. They're very real. I mean,
Yes.
you pass something around a table or over to something, and that
Yes.
means, and there's words that go with it. There's words you say when you give it, when you take it, and how you
Yes.
take it. And there's so many things that go with actions, and all of those can be done in a real way, not just in a sort of a synthetic, in a way that's artificial.
Yes. Yes. Andrew, this is fantastic. As we both know, we can and we will have much longer conversations. I hope this gives a taste of what real, let's stay with the word real, what real learning is, what real teaching is in for just one goal, real human to human communication. And that's what I had with you today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mo. I really enjoyed our chat here. It's been really good to talk to somebody who actually looks for the real meaning rather than skips by the meaning.
Yes.
Thank you
And
much.
goes to the words and grammar. Yes.
That's right.
Thank you.
That's right. Thank you.
Thank
Talk
you.
soon.
Yes.